You know that feeling when the zombie apocalypse hits and everyone's trying their best to survive? Well, apparently Chris didn't get the memo. While most people were worried about The Walking Dead, we were all worried about this walking headache. What's up, survivors? Today, we're diving deep into Fear the Walking Dead's most insufferable character, Chris Manawa. And trust me, in a world where the dead eat the living, somehow this kid managed to be more disturbing than a Walker Buffett. Now, before you rush to the comments saying, but he was just a troubled teen dealing with trauma, oh boy, do I have a story for you. We're about to break down how this supposedly innocent kid went from dad, I hate you, to maybe the zombies aren't so bad after all. Poor Travis. If only he knew that while he was busy being Father of the Year, his son was basically auditioning to be the apocalypse's biggest problem. And that's saying something in a world where flesh-eating monsters roam the streets. Let me tell you exactly why Chris isn't just another annoying teen character, but a masterclass in how to make viewers scream at their TV screens. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll understand why even the zombies would think twice before biting him. But before we dive into this spiral of bad decisions and daddy issues, make sure you hit that subscribe button, because just like Madison's determination to survive, you won't want to miss what's coming next. Buckle up, survivors. This is going to be one hell of a ride. Let's talk about family values, shall we? You know, those little things like not trying to kill your stepsister or not making your dad's life a living hell during a zombie apocalypse. Basic stuff, right? Well, not for Chris. Remember when the biggest family drama was deciding what to watch on TV? Chris took family drama to a whole new level. While Madison was trying to keep everyone alive and build some semblance of a family unit, Chris was basically writing how to destroy your family during the apocalypse for dummies. First, let's talk about his relationship with Madison and Alicia. Most people would be grateful to have a stepmom trying to keep them alive and a stepsister who's actually competent in the apocalypse. But no, Chris had to view them as threats, because apparently having capable women in your family during a zombie outbreak is just too much to handle for our boy Chris. But the real masterpiece, his relationship with Travis. Imagine having a dad who literally gives up everything for you, who keeps defending you even when everyone else sees the red flags. And what does Chris do? Treats him like he's the worst person in the world. And remember, we're in a world full of actual flesh-eating monsters. The most tragic part isn't even the way he acted, it's how he broke Travis's spirit. Here's a man who believed in his son so much that he was willing to risk everything, even his relationship with Madison, just to protect him, and Chris repaid that undying faith by becoming exactly what everyone feared he would become. You want to talk about character development? This isn't just teenage rebellion anymore. This is watching someone actively choose to become the villain in their own family story. And the worst part, he didn't even seem to care. Sure, the apocalypse changes people, but while most characters change to survive, Chris changed because he wanted to. He didn't just abandon his family's values. He took them out back and put them down like a walker. You know how some people say the apocalypse brings out who you really are? Well, in Chris's case, it was like watching a butterfly transformation, except instead of a beautiful butterfly, we got something closer to a radioactive cockroach. Let's do a little before and after, shall we? Before the apocalypse, Chris was your typical angsty teen, angry at his dad for the divorce, refusing to give his stepmom a chance. Typical, you don't understand me stuff. Regular teen drama, right? But then the dead started walking, and Chris took this as his personal invitation to unlock his inner psychopath. Remember that scene at the church? When everyone else was processing the horror of their new reality, Chris was already showing signs of being way too comfortable with violence. And not in a I need to survive way, but more in a hey, this is kind of fun way. Red flag number one, people. But the farm incident? That was his graduation ceremony from troubled teen to full-blown threat. While everyone else was trying to help that injured guy, Chris was basically auditioning for Top Psycho, Apocalypse Edition. When you're in a zombie apocalypse and the actual zombies aren't the scariest thing around, you know something's seriously wrong. The really disturbing part is how he justified everything. It's what we have to do now, he'd say, as if the apocalypse was his personal excuse to act out every dark impulse. Newsflash, Chris. Madison wasn't going around trying to murder family members, and she was doing just fine at surviving. Want to talk about character development? This wasn't development, this was a descent. While characters like Nick and Alicia were learning to adapt while keeping their humanity, Chris was treating the apocalypse like his personal villain origin story. It's like he read How to Be a Psychopath 101 and decided to skip straight to the advanced class. The scariest part? He didn't snap in one dramatic moment. This wasn't a sudden break. No, this was a slow, deliberate choice to embrace the darkness. Each decision, each justification, each betrayal was a step he consciously took, and that's what makes his evolution from troubled teen to psycho so disturbing. He was in the driver's seat the whole time. If manipulation was an Olympic sport, Chris would be taking home the gold medal. Actually, scratch that. He'd somehow convince everyone else to forfeit and just hand him the medal. metal. That's how good he was at playing people. Let's appreciate the artistry here, folks. Chris wasn't just your regular manipulator, he was a prodigy. While other kids were learning how to kill walkers, he was perfecting the art of making everyone question their own sanity. And his favorite target? Poor Travis, the man who wrote the book On My Son Can't Be That Bad, A Father's Guide to Denial. His greatest hit, playing the victim card while actively being the threat. It's like watching a lion pretend to be a wounded gazelle, except the lion is wearing a totally not a lion t-shirt. Remember how he'd act all vulnerable and misunderstood right after doing something completely psychotic? That's not teenage angst, that's manipulation level expert. The real masterpiece was how he used Travis's guilt about the divorce. Oh, you feel bad about breaking up the family? Let me use that to justify literally every horrible thing I do. Genius move. Really, Travis was so busy trying to make up for the past that he couldn't see the present nightmare unfolding right in front of him. And let's talk about his specialty, the apocalypse excuse. The world changed, Dad. Yeah, Chris, the world changed, but that doesn't mean you need to go full psycho. Madison managed to adapt without trying to murder her kids. Alicia learned to survive without becoming a complete monster. But Chris, he used the apocalypse like a get-out-of-jail-free card for every twisted thing he wanted to do. The truly scary part wasn't just the manipulation. It was how good he was at it. Every I had to do it was perfectly calculated. He knew exactly which buttons to push, which strings to pull, and which wounds to poke to get what he wanted. If he'd put half as much effort into actually being a decent human being as he did into manipulating everyone around him, he might have actually been the survivor his father thought he could be. But here's the real kicker. Even when people started seeing through his act, he just adapted his performance. It's like he was upgrading his manipulation software with every episode. Version 1.0 was misunderstood teen, version 2.0 was traumatized survivor, and the final version was just straight up, I don't even need to pretend anymore. You know how most people have this thing called a conscience? That little voice in your head that says, maybe don't do the horrible thing. Well, Chris's moral compass wasn't just broken, it was spinning like it got bit by a radioactive walker. Let's start with the attempted murder of Alicia. Most people's response to having a new stepsister is cold shoulders or passive-aggressive comments at family dinners. Chris, he went straight to let me just casually try to end her life. And the worst part, he acted like he was doing everyone a favor. Because apparently, in Chris's mind, family bonding activities now included murder attempts. But the real showstopper, the incident with that innocent girl at the farm, there's making tough choices in the apocalypse, and then there's whatever Chris was doing. While everyone else was wrestling with difficult moral decisions, Chris was treating ethics like they were optional DLC for the apocalypse that he decided not to download. You want to know the difference between survival and pure evil? Look at how other characters handled tough situations. Madison had to make hard choices, but they actually kept people alive. Nick did some questionable things, but they came from a place of protecting others. Chris, his decisions came from a place that would make walkers say, whoa, dude, that's dark. And here's the thing about moral decline. Usually there's some internal struggle, some moment of doubt, some hint that the person knows they're crossing lines. But Chris, he crossed those lines like he was skipping through a park. No hesitation, no remorse, just a casual, this is fine, while metaphorically setting everything on fire. Remember when the biggest moral dilemma in his life was whether to accept Madison as his stepmom? Fast forward a bit, and he's basically auditioning for top 10 most disturbing characters who aren't actually zombies. The scary part isn't just that he made bad choices, it's that he seemed to enjoy making them. The real kicker? He didn't even try to hide it anymore by the end. While most characters in the apocalypse struggled to keep their humanity, Chris treated his like an old jacket he decided to throw away because it wasn't apocalypse fashion. He didn't just lose his moral compass. He took it out back, smashed it to pieces, and used those pieces to make welcome to the dark side sign. If Chris deserves an award for anything, it's for his ability to traumatize literally everyone around in him. Seriously, this kid was like a walking emotional wrecking ball with a special talent for destroying people's mental health during an already pretty stressful zombie apocalypse. Let's start with the biggest casualty, Travis, aka Dad of the Year turned Broken Man of the Century. Watching Travis's transformation was like watching someone slowly lose their soul. One Chris wouldn't do that at a time. Here was a man who started the apocalypse as this strong moral compass kind of guy and ended up questioning everything he ever believed in, all thanks to his son's greatest hits album of terrible decisions. Remember how Travis used to be? Mr. We Don't Kill the Living? Mr. Their quote, always a better way. Well, after Chris's special brand of family therapy, Travis went from that to a man who could probably make walkers nervous. The transformation wasn't just sad. It was like watching someone's entire worldview get put through a meat grinder. And Madison? Poor Madison was stuck playing the world's worst game of I Told You So. She saw the red flags, tried to warn Travis, but ended up having to watch the man she loved destroy himself trying to save someone who didn't want to be saved. It's like watching someone try to give swimming lessons to a shark. It's not going to work, and someone's probably going to get hurt. Let's not forget about Alicia, who basically had to add surviving my psycho stepbrother to her already long list of apocalypse survival skills. Instead of just worrying about the dead trying to eat her, She had to worry about the supposedly alive family member who might push her off a balcony. Talk about family drama. The group dynamic completely shattered. What could have been a solid survivor family turned into a walking disaster because one teenager decided the apocalypse was his villain origin story. Every decision, every group split, every moment of tension, you could trace it back to Chris's special talent for chaos. But the real tragedy here? How his actions rippled through everyone's character development. While most characters in FTWD grew stronger through adversity, the people closest to Chris were forced to grow through trauma. Travis lost his optimism, Madison lost her trust in family bonds, and everyone else lost their ability to sleep peacefully at night knowing Chris was around. Think about it. In a world where the dead walk and eat the living, Chris managed to be the thing that kept people up at night. That's not just bad, that's impressively bad. He didn't just break people, he rewrote their entire character arcs into tragedy. You know how in most shows there's usually a redemption arc? That moment when the bad guy realizes the error of their ways and tries to make things right? Well, Chris saw that possibility and decided to set it on fire, dance around the ashes, or kneel, and then somehow make it even worse. Let's talk about the point of no return, joining that group of psychos he called friends. Most people in the apocalypse join groups for survival, companionship, maybe even to help others. Chris? He found the only people who made walkers look like reasonable dinner guests. It's like he went shopping for friends and specifically chose the most likely to murder you in your sleep collection. But wait, it gets better. Remember when he betrayed his own group? Not just any group, the people who had been protecting him, feeding him, literally keeping him alive. In the handbook of how to be the worst, that's like achieving a high score. Most people show gratitude by saying thanks or maybe sharing their food. Chris showed gratitude by basically gift wrapping danger and delivering it to their doorstep. And let's talk about those final decisions, you know, the ones that made even his new psycho buddies go, dude, that's messed up when you're too extreme for the extremists. Maybe it's time to rethink your life choices, but not Chris. He doubled down so hard he could have doubled down on his double down. The truly awful part, he was proud of it all. Every betrayal, every act of violence, every moment of cruelty, he wore them like badges of honor. While everyone else in the apocalypse was fighting to keep their humanity, Chris was trading his in for apocalypse villain points. You want to know what makes someone truly irredeemable? It's not just doing bad things, it's doing them with enthusiasm. It's seeing the line between survival and sadism and sprinting past it while giving everyone the middle finger. Chris didn't just cross lines, he erased them and drew new, worse ones. His final chapter wasn't just a tragedy, it was a masterclass in how to burn every bridge, salt every field, and poison every well of human decency. He didn't just become a villain. He became the kind of villain that other villains tell stories about to scare their villain kids. And the worst part, the absolute cherry on top of this sundae of awful, he never once showed real remorse. No last-minute redemption, no deathbed revelation, no maybe I shouldn't have been the worst. He committed to the role of apocalypse psycho with the kind of dedication that would make method actors uncomfortable. So here's to you, Chris, the character who made us realize that sometimes the real monster isn't the zombie trying to eat your brains. It's the teenager who decided that the apocalypse was just an excuse to live out his villain fantasies.